right, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I am going to talk to you about the low carbon Oxford North housewarming programme. And I have a few here to show you about in a minute. And why on earth did we start thinking about this? Well, you know all of these answers already. We have soaring energy costs. We have fossil fuel phase out ahead of us. Regulation is already here for private landlords and is coming for homeowners. You know, you will need to reach certain EPC levels before you're allowed to sell your homes, for example. And those of us who are increasingly concerned about climate change also want to cut the carbon emissions from our home. And we know from the fifth carbon budget, the Committee on Climate Change actually have pulled together that our homes are responsible for just under 30% of carbon emissions from our fossil fuel use. So if we want to cut that out, what do we need to start thinking about? And of course, what we do need to start thinking about is how on earth we upgrade our homes to stop that heat loss so we need less heating. And if we do upgrade them effectively and well, we know that we get immediate benefits. It cuts energy costs, it cuts energy bills, it cuts energy use, it cuts carbon emissions. These are all answering the previous challenges of the previous slide. We also know that although it's a costly investment into our usually biggest asset, we get an immediate return. So if you put insulation in your home and you spend 20 grand, I've made that figure up, and you cut your energy bill from £2,000 to £1,000, that's a 5% return. But it's a 5% return for every year afterwards, because obviously your heat loss is now half as much. So if you think about financial effectiveness in your biggest asset, you will not only be thinking about capital growth in the future, but you're also going to be adding value immediately for the spend that you make. But the question is, how on earth do you begin? So if you're anything like me, you know, I have my house, I'm worrying about climate change, I want to do something on the house, but I'm not technical in any way. I've got absolutely no intention of literally doing it myself. That's not something I'm going to do. I've had a look around on YouTube and the whole thing just is so completely overwhelming, you know. And yes, we have full service retrofit coordinators like the Cozy Homes Oxfordshire bunch, who are fantastic. But actually, I want to know what's happening in my own house, and I want to understand the choices that I'm making, and I want to get a feel for how do I put things together, how do I prioritize, what options do I have, and so we started the housewarming program to really build homeowners awareness and really provide that base knowledge and framework to enable us all to become much better buyers. So when we talk to the architects, or we talk to the builder who knows XYZ, or we talk to the heat pump seller, you know, we know what the questions are that we want to ask, and we can understand what we want from the homeowner perspective. So that is what we are doing with our housewarming program. And we debated quite a lot of trying to get the right level of information, and I hope that it's roughly right. And we also debated about what were we going to do and not do. So the principles behind what we've done are, we really wanted to make it independent. You know, we wanted this to be something anyone could use without feeling like we were trying to impose anything on people. But we also were aware that actually we would never be able to give the in-depth advice that you would be able to get from, you know, the internet more generally. So signposting was going to be really important. We also believe quite strongly that it's really hard to do yourself by yourself. So in North Oxford, we are putting together a sort of member support program. So people who are going through this experience, you know, some sort of forum where people can share experience and support each other through the work that they might be thinking about doing. So that we thought that was really important. And we will do we are doing already facilitated meetings and forums within our North Oxford environment. What we're definitely not doing is we're not giving specific advice about different brands. No, we're not trying to sell anyone anything. We're not going to help with sourcing products. We simply don't have the capacity. We're not going to do any discounts, because that, again, we simply don't have the capacity for that. And we're not doing any direct recommendations because we don't think that we're qualified to do that either. So it's very much a framework to help you on that pathway. And we've looked at each main retrofit area in detail. So we start with taking stock, which is number one. Well, what have I got? I wander around my house. What do I see? What have I got already? Have I got double glazing or not? You know, do I have cavity walls or are they solid walls? You know, that sort of thing. Where on earth do I even begin in this process? And then we go through all the main retrofit areas. These are two examples. You know, this is drafts and ventilation, and this one's on windows and doors. But we've got one on insulation, you know, roof, floor, walls, internal, external, all the questions you might be asking about insulation. And then we cover heating and controls, so air source heat pumps and hot water, and how do I optimize everything to make it all work effectively? What do I need to think about there? And then the last one is about doing a whole plan. It's really fundamentally important that even if you only do a tiny piece of the work, you know, I'm changing my windows, but before you do that, you know whether or not you're likely to do internal or external insulation. Because if you are going to do internal or external insulation, how you fit your windows matters. And you actually don't want to spend that amount of money twice. So if you think about all the things I could be doing on my home, even if I had no intention of being able to do that immediately, but what order should I do it in? What steps should I take? What do I need to consider at each point of whichever area I'm looking at the moment? So that's been really important to look at as well. And I'm just going to get rid of my pop-up. So what's in there? Well, just to give you a very rough feel of the sorts of things. So these are indications, and there are display guides out there on our table, the Alcon table outside, so you can come and have a look. So what tools are there to help me? You know, as simple as a thermal imaging camera. What's that going to show me? How do I use that? What's important about it? And what other tools are there out there that might help me with my decision making and the options I might get? The language, what language? I'm going to talk to that builder guy, and gosh, you know, he goes off and I have no idea what he's talking about. You know, what language, what are the core pieces of language do you need to understand? And we're all really used to this image. We all know this. You know, when you buy a new fridge, you get one of these, and you know, if you're up an A, that's good, and then, you know, if you're down at the bottom, that's bad. That's really familiar. But you don't get that with insulation materials. So how do you know? How do you know which ones are good and which ones are bad? So we talk about those key measures in all the various different core retrofit areas. So, you know, starting with what's a U value? You know, what's a good U value? What's a bad U value? You know, what does it mean exactly? What are the results if I choose a bad U value versus a good U value? So, you know, it's that kind of stuff. So what language do I need to know about? And then most of you won't be able to see this slide in detail, but don't worry about that. I'm not asking you to understand it really, but just as an illustration of the other sorts of things we've got in here. So if you're looking at insulation levels and U values, you know, if I'm starting with a solid wall, or let's do a floor, lots of us have suspended wooden floors. And if I start with one of those, what's my U value at the moment? And if I actually stuffed it full of insulation, what U value would I have as a result? So what are my targets? What am I actually aiming for? What's my objective when I do this work? And if I'm doing my whole plan and fitting it all together like a little jigsaw, how important is my floor insulation versus my windows versus my roof, etc.? So hopefully that sort of thing might be useful. And then also, again, you won't be able to read this, but really as a comparison, you know, I don't want that Grenfell stuff that is flammable on my house, but actually it's the most effective stuff that there is. So what's my compromise if I actually choose something much more environmentally sustainable? Well, actually, we can tell you that. We'll give you indications and some of the U values and some of the implications of that. So that's kind of what these guides do. We've shared them as we've been developing them. So 4 of them are available on our website, free of charge at the moment to download, and you can print them at home and take a look at them, etc. And we've shared them with some of my members, and this is the kind of thing they're saying back to us. They're saying, well, actually, they're great, because it gives us the other half of the conversation. You don't have any axe to grind. And actually, I wish I had it before I started. So we think that we're beginning to offer the right kinds of support and information. And I seem to have raced through my presentation. So any questions? Yes.
Is there anything in the guide specifically about dealing with conservation areas or anything like that, those particular areas?
Yeah, so what we do within the guides is, so in any conservation area or any listed building, it's really important that you understand the rules, and they will be available on, you just need to find out what the rules are. And what we're finding is that there's more and more debate about, can I actually do something in a listed home, and what can I do in a listed home? And so we do have some examples in here. So I mean, one that springs to mind is on windows and doors, for example. So if I've got listed building and I've got windows, that means that I can't have double or triple glazing in the traditional way. For example, there's an image here that you may or may not be able to see. So secondary glazing. So this secondary glazing, what's good secondary glazing? What should I be demanding when I'm looking at secondary glazing from installers? And how might it be used in a listed building? So those are the sorts of things we sort of point to and say, right, you're never going to get triple glazing, but you might be able to do secondary glazing. And actually, secondary glazing, if it's done well, can have a really good impact. So people often say, well, I've got a listed home, that means I can't do anything. But actually, that's not true. You can. There are things you can do. You just have to think about it slightly differently. Any more thoughts, questions? More detail people want to look at and go through? Yeah.
I don't want to hog with the, but I mean, you said they're free at the moment. Mm-hmm. You might charge further down the line.
No, I mean, we're a charity and we've fundraised for the money to be able to put these together, because it's done with expert support, obviously. And so we've had the money, we've paid for them. It's always wonderful if people give us donations, but we've made a choice to not make people pay for them at this point. However, if we are starting to partner with other organisations that are promoting them, particularly Tom, then I think in those kind of circumstances we can start talking about donations. And you can see that these ones are actually printed, so you won't get one looking like this from our website, because obviously you'll be downloading it and putting it on your own printers. So we are thinking about, if people wanted, versions like this that are more solid, then they obviously are more costly. So it might be that we ask for donations if people, if we find that people are asking for them. So yeah. We'll get really cross if people start plagiarizing our work.
How specific are they to this area? And also, how quickly do you think how long will they last in terms of when will they go out of date?
Yeah, so we've put a date on the bottom of them. So we put June 22 on them, so people are conscious of when they were actually pulled together. We think that the bones of them will actually last for a long time. We hope they do. I mean, there's some, we haven't been specific enough to say that it's this secondary glazing type that's, the best one you can have on the market. We've given examples of when it works better than others. So we're hoping it has real longevity, actually. We're hoping it does. Obviously, the world, we had a session earlier with somebody who was talking about all the technology that can monitor, when your fridge goes on and off and all of those sorts of things. So that sort of management of your energy use is going to explode in the future. And we haven't covered that sort of thing here. So yeah, but what does a solid wall house look like, and what impact does insulation have on it, and what are the things to consider if you put something on your wall? That's will be as true now as it will in 50 years time. So,
and in terms of the area,
oh, the area, yes. Well, again, we were very conscious when we were writing it. So, we're thinking North Oxford, but again, it's pretty applicable we think it's pretty applicable everywhere. We won't have covered every kind of house, and maybe our emphasis would be slightly different to other areas. But the advice we think remains true, and we think it, will be useful for everywhere. Is our view. But I'd love it if you actually took a look at them and gave us some feedback, because it's early days, and if we, it'd be great. One of the hardest thing was trying to decide at what level to pitch it. How much information to give people, and which bits of information, and when was it going to turn people off, and when was it going to be useful, type thing. So it's that sort of balance. So we weren't thinking this is for North Oxford. We were thinking this is for the homeowner that is really serious about thinking about this and might spend, £20,000. And what do they need to know to spend that in the most effective way possible? So it was less North Oxford and more sort of that sort of person.
Looking at briefly, one of your charts that came up and the difference between before and then after. Very quickly looking at it, it looked to me like Windows was number one. Is that fair? So if somebody has clicked and they have
so I would say, and I'm just going to say again, don't ask me for advice because I'm no expert, but I would say it really depends on what you've got already. So for example, if you already have double glazing, to go to triple glazing probably won't pay you back in as much as doing wall insulation would. So actually it depends on what you've got. If you've got single glazing windows, then yes, do your windows, but go as high as you can possibly afford, go to triple glazing. But yeah, so that's part of the reason why you need to take a good hard look at what you've got already. So insulation actually would be number one. Insulate, 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 particularly if you're seriously thinking about air source heat pumps.
Are you aware of other people in other parts of England having done this same kind of research you have for education of the public?
What we know is there's massive information out there, just masses, but they tend to, but my personal experience of it was that it was either the YouTube video of how do you put secondary insulation in, or it's the Energy Saving Trust put in some insulation. And it was the bit in the middle, or it was individual people selling a particular product.
I haven't read it yet.
So
me, everything you said just exactly the stuff I need to think about.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that we need the BBC, perhaps, to do a wonderful series of programs just to bring up so that people can think systematically through it and be helped.
Yeah, so they can definitely pay us if they want to.
Yes.
right there.
Absolutely right. Yes, every homeowner should know about this without question, in my view. Not every homeowner is going to be interested. They're going to be those that will require regulation before they lift a finger. There's definitely a big bunch in that camp. And there's also people who have, many of whom are here and going to be speaking later, who will do it themselves. They already know everything. They're going to just do it themselves. This is for the homeowner that is going to have to need somebody else to help them, but doesn't know what to ask about. If that makes sense.
We don't know what they don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry.
If your budget is not £20,000, but say £100, £1,000, £5,000, and that's all you can afford.
Yeah.
Can one use those guides to sort of work out what's the best way of spending that?
Yes.
£5,000, £1,000.
We were really conscious of that, actually, and our last one, and we've written it. It's with a designer at the moment. Is preparing a whole house plan, and that process is if I'm going to do this in bits, because that's most people, isn't it? Which order do I need to do it in? But also, it is about thinking about, well, if I'm doing this bit, what else do I need to consider when I'm specifying that job? Because, it's also about thinking about what next. So we have tried to do that, particularly in the last plan, because it's also about things like scaffolding. If I know I'm going to have to buy scaffolding once, what else could I be doing at the same time as the scaffolding's up? So we try and give practical examples, I suppose is the right word, for what to think about together as well.
And do you give ballpark numbers as to how much things would cost, or is that just impossible?
We decided not to do any of that because things are changing so much at the moment. So we've focused more on heat loss. How much heat am I going to, you know, how much will my heat loss be reduced if I did X or Y? So that's what the calculations are around. And now and then, and I don't know if that could be a good feedback, actually. I don't know if we've done this clearly enough, but depending on how mathematically minded, we have put a couple of calculations in there here and there. And it's about equating heat loss isn't the same as your energy bill, but it directly impacts on your energy bill. So in a couple of places, we've said, right, if you've cut your heat loss from this to here, okay, this equates to this many kilowatt hours. And if you go and look at your gas bill or your energy or your electricity bill, you will see how many kilowatt hours you're paying for at the moment. So we haven't said, don't worry, if you spend, you know, £20,000, you're going to save 1,000. We haven't said that, but we have said, if you do this work, that will cut this proportion of heat loss. Is that helpful? And this is how it equates. Yeah. Anything else? Great. Well,
I'm a bit concerned about this air tightness business, because I have a smoker in the house. So I'm very conscious of air quality, which is why we have, I have the windows open a lot of the time, all the year round. So I just need to, that's the ones that
drafts and ventilation. It's absolutely critical. Air quality is really, really, really important. And it's a really good question, because actually, as you do close up all your drafts, you do need to make sure that your air keeps being healthy. So we do cover that in the drafts and ventilation guide. That's why we've put it together. And it's also, again, another thing that many people have who have older homes. They have, you know, the fireplaces, etc. And there was over time an assumption that the house would be leaky enough, you know, for carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and all of those sorts of things. So if you close up all those leaks, then whatever was installed, you know, you have to consider the fact that you have to have enough ventilation to make sure you're not then poisoning yourself. So really, really, really important. And that's our guide for.
Can we ask you to put in the feedback forms?